New information on high refusal rates of IRCC PR applications, temporary resident visas, study permits on this edition of ImmPulse.
Hi, I'm Howard Greenberg.
Hi, I'm Greenberg Hameed.
Normally at this time, Noman, we would go through this edition of ImmPulse and talk about the case law and some government policy. There's not much policy announced in the last week, and the cases I kind of can sit for a bit because there's something more pressing to talk about. Have we been seeing a lot of prospective clients calling us up saying, what happened? We just got a refusal. Our representative can't explain what occurred or whether or not we should have done anything differently. So we decided to devote today's session to tips,
Right.
new ways to think about it. So what are your initial impressions on preparing an application and avoiding refusal?
Well, let's set the climate. We look at some public information.
Right.
We see that refusal rates for study permits at 65%.
Right.
Temporary resident visas to come visit a family member, 50%.
Right.
So the climate is very high in terms of refusals, PR applications as well. So your question is, well, what do you need to do? The first issue we see in these refusal applications is a lack of evidence.
Right.
Meaning you have to make your case. It has to be a compelling case.
Right.
And you have to anticipate where the officer's likely to drill down. For example, even on a visitor visa,
Right.
How strong are your ties? How can you convince an officer you will return back at the end?
Right.
And what type of evidence have you put forward to demonstrate to an officer that would be reasonable for your intended purpose? And at the end of your purpose, you would come back. And we've seen in many of the cases where the federal court has supported that an officer made an error, the officer did not engage in rich information. Coming to study, how does your studies tie to your work? What type of work do you have? Do you have currency savings? All of that information has to be prepared thoroughly. Most of the applications we see where there are issues, there's a lack of evidence. That's my first pointer, is detailed information.
So we're working backwards from reading case law. And what we've learned from the case law is that the courts will support an officer's decision if there was evidence available to the officer to look at and the officer turned his or her mind to the evidence. Or to put it another way, the cases have been successful to strike out a refusal where the officer had evidence in front of him or her and didn't look at it or address it in the adjudication of the application, which drives home the point you have to have rich information on the file. And the information that you put in must support the purpose and ability to undertake the reason you're coming to Canada.
Right. And I think another comment we would make is don't assume that the refusal letter template or the officer notes tell you the whole story. There's a lot of detail in the GCMS notes,
Right.
some of which actually can support your challenge of the case. For example, if an officer has looked at a new piece of information and has not given the applicant an opportunity to respond and explain, or if there's evidence on the file which addresses the very concern that the officer has, but they fail to address it. So I think the other thing we've seen is a lot of analysis whenever there's pushback to see how you can challenge, whether it's reconsideration or in some cases going and challenging the cases at the federal court.
You know, I can't help but believe that the role of legal counsel, in these cases has changed dramatically. It used to be that you met the minimum requirements, you put everything in the envelope, so to speak, uploaded it, and you expected your approval to come. Now there is an obligation on legal counsel to investigate all aspects of the application to determine how to best enhance it or bulletproof it.
Right.
Bulletproof it from a negative determination by an officer, and follow through by looking at the notes on file, the fairness letter when issued to make sure a more complete answer is provided. I think there's a much more comprehensive and deeper relationship between legal counsel and clients in this new environment.
I think a higher obligation too, when representing a client, in really understanding the latest trends of case law, because to your point, there are a lot more challenges these days, and there's a higher onus in terms of preparing a client and responding throughout this process of challenge.
As an illustration, maybe we can just talk briefly about an SUV case that we have been working on with a client in the last day or two. And the issue was essential members, which we know becomes a problem because the essential members who are hands-on in developing the business are the ones who are usually talking to their legal counsel and providing information. And the essential members who are not actively involved or not as actively involved are quiet in the background. No one's paying attention to them. And we have recently been looking much more carefully at all essential members because one essential member fails and everyone fails.
Right.
And so you must have a deeper connection to the application than simply filing the application and hoping for the best. You must be anticipating that letters are coming, fairness letters are coming to delve more deeply into what it is that you have prepared and represented to the immigration department, and you've got to be ready.
Right, that's a good point. Even on an extension of an SUV application for a work permit,
Right.
one would think fairly routine, you've been approved once.
Right.
Not quite the case. They're asking for a lot of evidence as to what have you done lately
Right.
and how have you detailed your significant economic benefit.
Right.
And you wouldn't find that in the guidelines. Those are things that you have to learn from the experience of what officers are looking for. It's changing quickly.
And to be fair, from the officer's point of view, reviewing these applications, their primary goal is just to figure out, is this real? Are they pulling the wool over our eyes? Or in the SUV situation, are they just applying to get a visa? They really don't care about the business. If they cared about the business, how come they haven't done more? How come they haven't committed more time and energy? How come the ideas aren't innovative? How come they can't answer our fairness letters properly?
Well, we see some officers where they've really become quite sophisticated in analyzing those cases. But then we see others, we know 3,300 have been reduced and they're using different types of AI, but sometimes the answers are so off base, they don't make any sense.
Right.
So it's a mixed bag right now. Every case is a unique one.
Look, I want to conclude my thoughts on simply restating over and over again. The applicant can't rely wholly on his lawyer or her lawyer. You got to roll up your sleeves and get involved. And the lawyer or a consultant can't simply rely on the client. They have to roll up their sleeves and get involved. And if the client's not giving enough, you have to get more.
Right. Well said.
Okay. Please feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions about your existing application, or you're intending to file an application and you're concerned about having all the documentation and information necessary. It never is too late to do your homework and to complete your application as fully as possible. Thank you.